Chapter 2012. Behind Lan Qingyan's carriage was a woman dressed in a peony-colored robe. Although it was Bailey Hongzhuang's first time seeing her, she knew that this was Lan Qingyan's mother, Yu Manlan. She was the instigator of this matter. If it wasn't for Yu Manlan's selfishness, how could they have fallen to such a state? Speaking of which, the instigators of this matter were Wuxia and Yu Manlan. These two women from the Yu clan had the hearts of snakes and scorpions. It wouldn't be long before she would tear apart their pretense of elegance and nobility, revealing their true faces in front of everyone. Yu Manlan was originally in a good mood, so she took the time to return to her maternal home to take a look. However, just as she was feeling happy, she suddenly felt a chill down her spine. When she wanted to see where the problem came from, it had already disappeared, as if it had never appeared. Yu Manlan thought for a moment, then shook her head. This was Yutian City. It was impossible for such a situation to occur. She must have been hallucinating. Yu Manlan shook her head and ignored that feeling. With her current noble status, who would dare to harm her? Unless they didn't want to live anymore. After Lan Qingyan and Yu Manlan's carriage disappeared from her sight, Bailey Hongzhuang retracted her gaze. Bewitching's hand had already quietly rested on Bailey Hongzhuang's shoulder. He also didn't expect to meet Lan Qingyan and Yu Manlan here today. Hongzhuang saw these two enemies for the first time, so the impact on her heart must be great. Wife, you will soon take back everything that belongs to you. Bewitching's voice was firm and unquestionable. Things that were taken from others didn't belong to them. The glory that Lan Qingyan and Yu Manlan were enjoying now would eventually be overturned by their hands. His beloved wife was almost ruined by these despicable and shameless people. Even if it was him, he would not allow them to continue living freely like this. I was just thinking, every time father and mother knew that Lan Jingquang's family was living such a glorious life, how much pain did they feel in their hearts? Bailey Hongzhuang gritted her teeth, and every word seemed to be squeezed out from between her teeth. She was almost certain that every time Yu Manlan and the others returned to the Yu clan, Wuxia would definitely tell her parents the news. The enemy who had caused him to be in such a miserable state had been living such a carefree life all these years. When father and mother heard this news, their hearts must have been bleeding. The feeling of wanting to destroy everything was spreading, but he couldn't do anything about it. Just the pain of blood and tears was not something that an ordinary person could understand. As Bailey Hongzhuang's voice fell, Bewitching's body shook. Bailey Hongzhuang's words gave him a great shock. Just thinking about this kind of pain was unbearable for him, let alone Lan Yunxiao and his wife. Wife, all of this suffering will end. Bewitching held Bailey Hongzhuang's hand tightly. Bailey Hongzhuang's hand was ice cold without a trace of warmth, just like her pale face that was filled with pain. I'm fine. Bailey Hongzhuang gritted her teeth. She knew that all of this pain was meaningless. She wanted to solve all of this herself and return all of this pain to these dirty and shameless people 1,000 times over. Chapter 2013. In fact, Bailey Hongzhuang was not the only one who was in pain. When Tian saw Lan Qingyan and Yu Manlan, his eyes were also filled with anger. It was these people who had ruined his daughter and granddaughter's lives. He suppressed the urge to make a move. He really wanted to strangle the two of them to death. However, if he made a move now, Mu Lingbing would not be able to see, and he would not be able to vent his anger. Therefore, he would let the two of them live for a while longer. However, this comfortable life would not last long. Bewitching poured a cup of tea for Bailey Hongzhuang to let Bailey Hongzhuang regain her composure. They still had to make a move later. Hongzhuang could not afford to lose her composure now. At this moment, there was a knock on the door. Bewitching opened the door and saw Emo Yunjue standing outside. Emo Yunjue did not have time to greet Bewitching. His gaze was already fixed on Bailey Hongzhuang. He did not expect Lan Qingyan and Yu Manlan to come to the Yu clan today. When he saw Lan Qingyan and Yu Manlan's carriage, he knew that something was wrong. He was also clear about the enmity between the two of them and Hongzhuang. At this moment, Hongzhuang must have seen them as enemies. However, this was not the time to have a conflict with Lan Qingyan and Yu Manlan. He knew that Hongzhuang would definitely suppress the displeasure in her heart. However, The impact of this scene on her would not be small. After all, she came to Utian City to rescue her parents. However, she met her enemies here. Comparing the two, one could imagine the pain and hatred in her heart. Faced with such a background, even he could not help but feel sorry for Bailey Hongzhuang. Fortunately, when Mo Yunjue saw Bailey Hongzhuang, although Bailey Hongzhuang's face was slightly pale, she did not lose her composure. Bewitching knew the purpose of Mo Yunjue coming to the house at this moment. He must be worried about Hongzhuang. He immediately stepped aside and allowed Mo Yunjue to enter the room. Mo Yunjue nodded at Bewitching and slowly walked to Bailey Hongzhuang's side. "Hongzhuang, are you alright?" Mo Yunjue asked. Bailey Hongzhuang glanced at Mo Yunjue, and the corners of her mouth curled into a smile. However, this smile did not reach her eyes. "I'm fine. I've known about this for a long time. Although today is the first time I've seen them, I'll have many opportunities to meet them in the future. Don't worry about me." Bailey Hongzhuang's voice was cold. This time, there was no conflict between them. However, the next time they met, everything would not be so simple. After Mo Yunjue felt the intense hatred in Bailey Hongzhuang's words, he also understood that no matter who it was, with such a background, when facing their enemies, they would definitely be filled with hatred. Not to mention Bailey Hongzhuang, if it was him, he would definitely make Lan Qingyan's family live a life worse than death. After Hongzhuang, Lan Qingyan and the others arrive, I'm afraid that there will be some changes in the situation. I'll ask my subordinates to find out about their situation after they entered the Yu clan. After that, we'll decide whether to take action tonight. How about it? Mo Yunjue slowly said. If Lan Qingyan and the others did not appear, there would not be any problems taking action tonight. However, since there was a variable, then any changes were possible. They had to be prepared. Chapter 2014. Bailey Hongzhuang naturally knew that this sudden turn of events would affect their following actions, so she nodded. All right. Hearing this, Mo Yunjue walked out of the room and instructed his subordinates to keep an eye on Lan Qingyan and Yu Manlin's movements after they entered the Yu residence. After Mo Yunjue left, Bailey Hongzhuang clenched her fists again, her gaze sinister and ruthless. Bewitching saw the change in Bailey Hongzhuang's expression, and his deep and charming eyes were filled with concern. Wife, what's wrong? My parents have been imprisoned by Yu Siqing for so many years. Others may not know, but Yu Manlan and the others must know. Following Bailey Hongzhuang's words, Bewitching's expression changed slightly. He had also considered this point. Back then, this matter was done by Yu Siqing and Yu Manlan. Lan Jingquang also knew about this. All these years, Lan Jingquang and his family would occasionally come to the Yu residence to show off in front of her parents. Back in the Lan residence, Lan Jingquang had been suppressed by Lan Yunxiao in every aspect, but he had been forced to turn things around. Since Lan Jingquang was able to do such a thing back then, his mentality was naturally extremely twisted. I'm afraid that Yu Manlan and Lan Qingyan will definitely go to Yu Siqing's basement after going to the Yu residence. Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes were filled with a cold light. She originally thought that after saving her parents today, her parents' suffering would end here. She never thought that Yu Manlan and Lan Qingyan would suddenly appear. Her parents would probably have to endure another round of humiliation. Thinking of this, Bailey Hongzhuang felt an indescribable pain in her heart. Bewitching was also speechless towards Bailey Hongzhuang's words. In fact, he had the same thought in his mind. Lan Yunxiao and his wife had already suffered enough these years. He never thought that they would have to endure another round of suffering today. None of them thought that there would be a new problem and another unforeseen event while saving them today. Wife, we will definitely rescue Uncle and Auntie tonight. Don't worry too much. At a time like this, all words seemed to pale in comparison. However, even if the situation had changed due to Lan Qingyan's appearance, they would still rescue them tonight. As for the matter of revenge, they would be ready very soon. Bailey Hongzhuang narrowed her eyes and fell into silence. Although he was furious, there was nothing he could do about it. She could only wait for Mo Yunjue's men to return and tell her the details of the situation. She only hoped that this matter would not change too much, because of the arrival of Lan Qingyan and Yi Qingyu. If their parents had to suffer another round of humiliation, then they would remember this taste and return it 1,000 times in the future. After Lan Qingyan and Yu Manlan arrived at the Yu clan, they were welcomed by the Yu clan. Lan Qingyan's reputation among the younger generation of cultivators was extremely resounding. Her position in the Lan family was also incomparable. Just the Rainbow Divine Pearl's special power was not something that ordinary people could compare to. Although Lan Qingyan was a member of the Lan family, she also had half of the Yu clan's bloodline. Therefore, the Yu clan was equally proud of her. Lan Qingyan looked at the Yu clan's welcoming manner and felt a burst of pride in her heart. With her talent and strength, there were not many people in the younger generation who could compare to her. Chapter 2015. Bailey Hongzhuang and Bewitching quietly waited for news in the room. The two of them didn't make any unnecessary movements and just sat quietly at the side. However, the anxiety in their hearts couldn't be concealed. Now, every minute and every second was a kind of torture to them. They could only wait here. After an hour, Mo Yunjue finally appeared in Bailey Hongzhuang and Bewitching's line of sight. However, Mo Yunjue's expression was obviously not good. Yu Manlan and Lan Qingyan went to find Yu Xiqing not long after arriving at the Yu clan. Mo Yunjue couldn't help but look at Bailey Hongzhuang. Yu Manlan and Yu Xiqing had a very deep relationship. However, Lan Yunxiao and Mu Lingbing were imprisoned below Yu Xiqing. As for whether they were talking to Yu Xiqing or had gone to the dungeon, they couldn't tell from outside. However, under such circumstances, the latter was obviously more likely. The teacup in Bailey Hongzhuang's hand instantly turned into powder after hearing Mo Yunjue's words. Although she had already guessed this possibility, when it really happened, she couldn't help but feel even worse. I've already sent people to keep an eye on them and see when they come out of the room. Mo Yunjue spoke. Hongzhuang, you don't have to worry too much. Lan Qingyan and Yu Manlan's appearance didn't cause too much of a change. On the contrary, they might have helped us. Hearing this, Bewitching couldn't help but look at Mo Yunjue and ask, "What do you mean?" Lan Qingyan's status in the Lan clan is very high. The Yu clan also values Lan Qingyan very much. Therefore, the Yu clan is already preparing a banquet. Tonight, the Yu clan's members will all have a banquet together. In this way, Yu Xiqing will definitely leave the room, and it will be more convenient for us to take action. As he spoke, Mo Yunjue observed the changes in Bailey Hongzhuang's expression. In this situation, he was unable to comfort Bailey Hongzhuang. He could only hope that this news would comfort Bailey Hongzhuang a little. "Master, are you alright?" Xiao He looked worriedly at Bailey Hongzhuang. Ever since Lan Qingyan and Yu Manlan appeared, Master's mood had not been right. They were really worried. Xiao Bai and Bai Shi also looked worriedly at Bailey Hongzhuang. Although they knew that their master was in a terrible mood, they were still worried about her. Looking at the worried looks of the three beasties, Bailey Hongzhuang shook her head. "It's nothing. I was just thinking about how to give Yu Xiqing and the rest a surprise." Yu Xiqing, Yu Manlan, Lan Qingyan. These three women were undoubtedly the three women she hated the most. Although her goal today was to save her parents, and she couldn't waste any more time here, she still had to think of a way to return something to them. Otherwise, this would not be in line with her personality. The three beasties, who were originally worried, were relieved after hearing Bailey Hongzhuang's words. This was their master's true nature. Since things had come to this, they had to get something back. They couldn't let the other party continue to be so arrogant. Bewitching and Mo Yunjue heaved a sigh of relief after seeing Bailey Hongzhuang's expression. At least, they didn't need to be so worried anymore. Chapter 2016. After all, the Yu clan had gone overboard with Hongzhuang. If they didn't collect some interest, they wouldn't be happy about it. Bailey Hongzhuang's gaze landed on Mo Yunjue and said, "Yunju, do you have a detailed map of the Yu clan?" Since she was here, she had to leave something behind. Otherwise, it wouldn't be in line with her character. Although she couldn't deal with the Yu clan now, it wouldn't be a problem for her to do other things. Hearing Bailey Hongzhuang's words, Mo Yunjue's eyes were filled with doubt. He didn't know what Hongzhuang was planning to do, However, no matter what Hong Zhuang chose to do, he would support her. Yes, Mo Yunjue nodded. Previously, when they were searching for the location where Lan Yunxiao and his wife were being held, they had spent a lot of effort. They were very familiar with every place in the Yu clan. Therefore, they naturally had a detailed map of the distribution of the Yu clan. Bailey Hongzhuang took the map from Mo Yunjue's hands, and her eyes immediately brightened. Beichen, you and Yunju go to the next room first. I need to prepare some things. Following Bailey Hongzhuang's words, Di Beichen and Mo Yunjue looked at each other and nodded. To them, as long as Hong Zhuang's mood could improve, then no matter what Hong Zhuang did, it would be good. After Di Beichen and Mo Yunjue left together, Bailey Hongzhuang quickly took out the materials from the primordial chaos ring. The three beasties looked curiously at Bailey Hongzhuang. Every time Master wanted to prank someone, she would use some unexpected method. They didn't know what Master was planning to do this time. Bailey Hongzhuang looked at Xiao He and Xiao Bai in front of her and said, I'll have to trouble you today. Upon hearing Bailey Hongzhuang's words, Xiao He and Xiao Bai did not feel tired at all. Instead, they looked very excited. Master, what do you want us to do? As long as we can do it, there will be no problem. Xiao He's eyes lit up. It already hated the Yu clan to the core. Now that it had the chance to take revenge on them, it was the happiest thing in the world. White Lion was a little disappointed. At a time like this, he wanted to do something for his master. Bailey Hongzhuang stroked Baisher's head. She knew how Baisher felt. However, given the situation today, it was not convenient for White Lion to take action. The Yu clan was heavily guarded. White Lion's body was getting bigger and bigger. It was too eye-catching. If they were captured by the Yu clan, that would be really bad. Xiao He and Xiao Bai were different. They could change their sizes at will, and it was almost impossible for them to be discovered. Master, do you want us to bring explosives to the Yu clan's most important place? Xiao Bai looked excitedly at Bailey Hongzhuang. For it, who wanted to see the world in chaos, it was also full of evil ideas. Bailey Hongzhuang nodded slightly. This is indeed one of the plans. Hearing this, White Lion asked curiously, There's a second plan? Of course. Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes were filled with a ruthless light. The Yu clan was the first to be unkind to them. Then, they shouldn't blame her for being unjust. I have to hurry up and make the poison powder. After Bailey Hongzhuang left a sentence, she began to get busy. Chapter 2017. This was not the first time Bailey Hongzhuang had used the poison powder. Back in the Qing dynasty, she had given the crown prince Nangong Ouchen a pill made from this poison powder. It was precisely because of this poison powder that half of the Qing dynasty's royal family was crippled by her and could not recover in a short period of time. As a medical family, the Yu family had attainments in medicine and poison that others did not have. Therefore, she had to improve the poison powder a little to achieve a certain effect. Bailey Hongzhuang had studied this before, but she felt that it was too vicious, so she did not make it. However, in the face of a family like the Yu family, no matter how vicious the method was, it was nothing. Even under such circumstances, Bailey Hongzhuang could still concentrate on making the poison powder. Perhaps in this situation, she could only do this to calm herself down. The three beasts quietly stayed at the side, watching their master make the poison powder. But in their minds, they were thinking about how they should act at night. Just as Bailey Hongzhuang was busy, Yu Xiqing's residence was another scene. Yu Manlan and Lan Qingyan followed Yu Xiqing into the dungeon. The dark and damp environment made Yu Manlan and Lan Qingyan frown. This kind of environment was really unbearable for them, who lived like princes. After seeing Yu Manlan and Lan Qingyan, Lan Yunxiao and Mu Lingbing's faces darkened. For them, no matter what kind of torture they suffered in this dungeon, it was not the worst. Every time Lan Jingquang and the others came, they felt an unbearable humiliation. Mu Lingbing's gaze fell on Lan Qingyan. Yixian was not much younger than Lan Qingyan. If Yixian was still alive, she would be about the same age now. Unfortunately, because of these guys in front of her, she would never have the chance to see Yixian again. As a mother, this was the greatest pain in her life. After feeling Mu Lingbing's hateful gaze, Yu Manlan and Lan Qingyan could not help but feel uncomfortable in their hearts. This kind of malicious gaze really made people's hair stand on end. Mu Lingbing, no matter how you look at us, you are destined to be a prisoner in this life, Yu Manlan said coldly. She hated Mu Lingbing's gaze and hated this dark and damp dungeon. Mu Lingbing looked coldly at Yu Manlan. Unrighteous deeds are doomed to destruction. Yu Manlan, I want to see how long you can remain arrogant. She had done such a despicable and filthy thing, yet she was still dressed so beautifully. All of this was snatched by you. No matter how you pretend to be yours, in the end, you're just trying to paint a tiger, but end up looking like a dog. When Mu Lingbing thought about how she used to treat Yu Manlan as her sister-in-law, and how they were on very good terms, she felt a wave of disgust wash over her. Speaking of which, she had too much in the past, and was immersed in her own happiness. She had never paid attention to the thoughts of these despicable people. Hearing Mu Lingbing's words, Yu Manlan couldn't help but think of how she had been suppressed by Yu Manlan in the past. To her, it was a humiliating gaze that she didn't want to recall. She was also the daughter of the Yu family, but after marrying into the Lan family, she had been suppressed by Mu Lingbing. Be it in terms of looks, power or charisma, she couldn't compare to Mu Lingbing. It was as if she was just a supporting character in Mu Lingbing's presence. Everyone's eyes were on Mu Lingbing. Chapter 2018. She was the young miss of the Yu family, while Mu Lingbing was just an orphan. Even if she was an outstanding disciple of the Sun Moon Palace, her status couldn't compare to hers. But under these circumstances, she was still being suppressed by Mu Lingbing. One could only imagine how frustrated she was. So no matter what, she had to trample Mu Lingbing under her feet. If Bailey Hongzhuang was here, she would definitely feel that Yu Manlan was very similar to Yu Siqing. No wonder they were both from the Yu family. Yu Manlan quickly walked forward and slapped Mu Lingbing hard across the face. Slap. Blood trickled from the corner of Mu Lingbing's mouth, but her eyes were still ruthlessly glaring at Yu Manlan. Mu Lingbing, you're destined to be a prisoner for the rest of your life. You'll never be able to free yourself. Right now, almost everyone has forgotten about your existence. Jingquang Qingyan, and I have the highest status in the Lan family. Mu Lingbing coldly snorted. You're deceiving yourself. Yu Manlan was even angrier at Mu Lingbing's words. Lan Yunxiao also glared at Yu Manlan. This woman dared to hit Mu Lingbing. His heart was filled with rage. He wanted to break free from these shackles, but there was nothing he could do. Yu Manlan couldn't help but turn to Yu Siqing. Aunt, why don't you just kill them? So much time has passed. There's no point in keeping them alive. Instead, it's displeasing to look at them. Yu Manlan had no interest in torturing Mu Lingbing. She only hoped that Lan Yunxiao and Mu Lingbing would disappear from this world. In this way, there would be no one to remind her of her lowly past. However, she couldn't understand why Yu Siqing and Lan Jingquang insisted on keeping them alive. Lan Qingyan frowned at this scene. She also didn't like coming to this place, but her grandaunt and father were very enthusiastic. Yu Siqing shook her head at Yu Manlan's words. They're still useful. Don't think too much about it. She hadn't let Situ Yen and Mu Jin see Mu Lingbing and Lan Yunxiao suffering with their own eyes. How could she just end their lives like this? Yu Manlan felt helpless. She had already expected this result. Over the years, she had asked many times, but her aunt had always been so insistent. She was helpless. Yu Manlan looked at Mu Lingbing with disgust. You can continue to struggle at death's door here, living a life where you can't see the light of day. I will let you know how glorious our family is. Bailey Hongzhuang was concentrating on making the poison powder. After spending an hour and a half, Bailey Hongzhuang stopped. Bailey Hongzhuang put the poison powder into a small cloth bag. This cloth bag was also sewn by her just now. It was small and easy for Little Black and Little White to carry. Master, are you done? Little Black, who had been silent the whole time, couldn't help but ask after seeing Bailey Hongzhuang stop. Bailey Hongzhuang nodded slightly. This poison powder is very powerful. When the time comes, you need to be careful. Xiao He and Xiao Bai nodded. Understood. Chapter 2019. Hearing Bailey Hongzhuang's words, the three beasts' eyes were filled with excitement. This idea was really bad. However, they liked it. Master, where should we put this poison powder? White Lion asked. We should put it somewhere with a lot of people. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled. As a clan, the most important thing is the younger generation. If we put this poison powder in the residence of the younger generation, or in the training grounds, I believe it will be enough to trouble them for a while. If we use this poison powder at the banquet, wouldn't the effect be better? Xiao He asked. Bailey Hongzhuang waved her hand. There will be too many people at the banquet, and the Yu clan will have many experts. It will be too difficult to poison them without anyone noticing. As a medical family, the Yu clan is very familiar with such methods, so we can't do that. Since the Yu clan is holding the banquet tonight, you can go to the residence and scatter the poison powder in the room. You don't need a lot of it, the poison powder is very effective. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled coldly. Even if the Yu clan was a medical family, it would still take a lot of time for them to neutralize her poison powder. Just this short period of time would be enough to cause a lot of trouble for the Yu clan. As for the other part, she would use it together with the explosives. When the explosives exploded, there would be a lot of white smoke and a special smell. In this way, the Yu clan would not notice it at all. In short, she would definitely leave an unforgettable memory for the Yu clan tonight. Master, don't worry. We will definitely complete the task that you have given us perfectly. Xiao He and Xiao Bai patted their chests and said. Bailey Hongzhuang looked at the sky. At this moment it was already late, and they had to start moving. Thinking of this, Bailey Hongzhuang opened the door and walked into the room next door. Di Beichen and Mo Yunjue had always been concerned about Bailey Hongzhuang's movements. When they saw Bailey Hongzhuang, their eyes lit up. Wife, Hongzhuang. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled faintly, her expression returning to normal. It's getting late. Is there any news? Yu Manlan and Lan Qingyan left after entering Yu Xiqing's room for an incense stick's worth of time. Now, the entire Yu clan is preparing for the banquet. If nothing unexpected happened, Yu Xiqing would also leave the house. Mo Yunjue said slowly. This was undoubtedly excellent news for them. Then you will be able to sneak into the Yu clan safely. I need to enter through the Yu clan's main gate. Looking at the Yu clan's situation tonight, it's obvious that they won't agree to the treatment. However, in order to not arouse their suspicion, I still have to make a trip there. Everything that happened here could not escape the Yu clan's eyes. The Yu clan would definitely know about the people who came. Delaying for a short period of time was nothing. But if he didn't go for a long time, then it would reveal some clues. If possible, Mo Yunjue also wanted to move together with Bailey Hongzhuang and the others. However, when he went to the Yu clan to inquire about the news, he went there personally. Therefore, he had to complete this act now. Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen both understood Mo Yunjue's situation and nodded in understanding. Then we can move now. Bailey Hongzhuang said. That's right. Let's go. Di Beichen said. Mo Yunjue looked at Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen and said, be careful. Chapter 2020. Bailey Hongzhuang, Di Beichen and Mo Yunjue split into 3 groups and started to move. Although it was Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen's first time in Yutian City, they had already found out the exact location after looking at Mo Yunjue's map. Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen walked towards the Yu clan. At this moment, they had already bought a new set of clothes. Even their appearances had changed a little. Bailey Hongzhuang was confident that no one would be able to recognize their true appearances after changing their appearances. Mo Yunjue was not at ease with Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen moving alone. Hence, he had even sent some of his subordinates to guide Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen. Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen quickly arrived outside the Yu clan's high walls. The Yu clan's walls were extremely high, and the area covered was also very large. Fortunately, under the guidance of Mo Yunjue's subordinates, they had arrived at the place closest to Yu Xiqing. Bailey Hongzhuang then looked at Xiao He and Xiao Bai who were beside her. Have you guys memorized the Yu clan's map? Previously, she had already asked Xiao He and Xiao Bai to memorize the map. After such a long time, she believed that Xiao He and Xiao Bai had already memorized the map. Hearing Bailey Hongzhuang's words, Xiao He and Xiao Bai nodded confidently. Master, don't worry. We have already memorized it. Looking at Xiao He and Xiao Bai's confident looks, Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes were filled with a smile. Since that's the case, you guys can start moving first. According to their current situation, the younger generation of the Yu clan had already started to rush to the location of the banquet. However, Yu Xiqing had not left yet, so now was not the time for them to take action. Mo Yunju's subordinate had already left after informing Bailey Hongzhuang of the situation. Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen were dressed in black robes, their figures leaping straight into the Yu clan. After entering the Yu clan, Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen took a quick glance and discovered that there was a house not far away. It was Yu Xiqing's residence. The two of them immediately retracted their figures and hid in the darkness. They were going to wait here for Yu Xiqing to leave before rescuing Lan Yunxiao and Lan Yunqi at lightning speed. According to Bailey Hongzhuang's original plan, they were going to use explosives to lure Yu Xiqing away. However, after the banquet, they didn't need to go through so much trouble. They only needed to wait for Yu Xiqing to leave before sneaking into her house. Whether it was Bailey Hongzhuang or Di Beichen, both of them had a certain level of ability in concealing their aura. Although Yu Xiqing was very powerful, their methods weren't weak either. Even so, Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen were still somewhat worried. According to the information they had gathered, Yu Xiqing was an extremely cautious person. The slightest movement would attract her attention. Therefore, they could only be extremely careful to prevent being discovered by Yu Xiqing. However, Bailey Hongzhuang also had her own way of dealing with this. Once Yu Xiqing discovered them, she and Di Beichen would directly enter the chaos ring. This way, Yu Xiqing wouldn't be able to find them. Overall, they were still full of confidence in today's operation. Chapter 2021. Her parents were shrouded in the darkness of this house. Her enemy was living in this house. Thinking of this, her heart was filled with an indescribable indignation. However, in this situation, she could not reveal any killing intent. She could only suppress all these emotions in her heart. As an expert, she was extremely sensitive to killing intent. No matter when, as long as she revealed a slight killing intent, the other party would be able to sense it. Di Beichen's gaze fell on Bailey Hongzhuang. Seeing that Bailey Hongzhuang had concealed all her emotions so perfectly, his eyes were filled with admiration. While Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen were waiting quietly, Xiao He and Xiao Bai had already rushed into the Yu clan at lightning speed. Their bodies had shrunk to the smallest size possible, as small as a rock. Normal people would not notice them at all. Xiao Bai's body was originally black. In this dark night, it would not attract any attention at all. Xiao He's body was white. However, before it could move, Bailey Hongzhuang had already turned its body black. Therefore, it and Xiao Bai would not be discovered by others. Xiao He and Xiao Bai quickly moved around the Yu clan, their eyes constantly looking around. Previously, they had already memorized the map of this place. Therefore, they had a certain understanding of the Yu clan's martial arts field and the disciples' living quarters. Now that they had entered the Yu clan, they headed straight to their destination without wasting any time. They were very clear that their master did not leave them much time. They needed to complete all of this before their master took action and successfully meet up with their master and the others. However, their time was not short either. As long as they met up with their master before she left the Yu clan, everything would be considered a success. Xiao He, you go to the disciples' living quarters. I'll go to the martial arts field. We'll split up and complete all of this as soon as possible. Xiao Bai said slowly. The Yu clan's territory was extremely large. Even if their speed wasn't considered slow, they still had to take into account other people's attention, so they had no choice but to slow down. If the two of them moved together, it would take a lot of time. Only by splitting up could they save as much time as possible. This way, they would be able to quickly reunite with their master. Hearing Xiao Bai's words, Xiao He nodded and said, "No problem." While Xiao He and Xiao Bai were taking action, Mo Yunjue had already brought the patient to the Yu clan. He wanted to attract even more people during this banquet. Although he knew that he would definitely be rejected by the Yu clan, being able to delay a bit of time was also extremely good for him. After all, time was of the essence to Bailey Hongzhuang and the others. Bailey Hongzhuang held her breath as she waited. This Yu Xiqing was indeed different from ordinary people. The other members of the Yu clan had already started to head towards the location of the night banquet. But Yu Xiqing had stayed in the house without coming out. Thinking up to this point, Bailey Hongzhuang couldn't help but frown. Could it be that Yu Xiqing didn't plan to attend the banquet at all? If that was the case, then their plan would have to change a bit. Just as Bailey Hongzhuang was thinking about this, and her mood was unstable, Yu Xiqing, who was in the house, suddenly felt something and quickly rushed out of the house. Chapter 2022. Yu Xiqing quickly appeared in the hiding place of Bailey Hongzhuang and Bewitching. She scanned her surroundings but found nothing. Yu Xiqing furrowed her brows. She had clearly sensed an unusual aura in this place. Why had it disappeared? She had moved very quickly. If the other party had been standing here, she would have been able to see the direction in which they had left. However, there was clearly nothing. This was too strange. Yu Xiqing stood on the wall of the courtyard and scanned her surroundings carefully. There were no signs of anyone leaving. Seeing this scene, even Yu Xiqing couldn't help but be confused. Could it be that she had sensed wrongly? After Bailey Hongzhuang and Bewitching entered the chaos ring, their foreheads were drenched in cold sweat. Bailey Hongzhuang gasped for breath, her heart still palpitating with fear. Previously, she had only revealed a little bit of her aura, because she had been wondering why Yu Xiqing had not left. She did not think that Yu Xiqing would be so sharp that she would not miss even the slightest movement. It was a good thing that when she had noticed the change in Yu Xiqing's aura, she had immediately hid in the chaos ring with Bewitching. Otherwise, she and Bewitching would have been exposed to Yu Xiqing's eyes. Yu Xiqing is very powerful indeed. Bewitching's eyes were filled with fear. If they had been a second slower, they would have been caught by Yu Xiqing. Once they had been caught by Yu Xiqing, the consequences would have been unthinkable. It seems that we'll have to stay in the chaos ring for a while. Bailey Hongzhuang slowly spoke. Since Yu Xiqing was so sharp, she must be certain that the two of them had been here before. This meant that Yu Xiqing would not be leaving anytime soon, so they could only stay here for a while longer. Besides, Yu Xiqing's senses were so sharp. As long as she had revealed a little bit of her aura, Yu Xiqing would be able to sense it immediately. Therefore, in order for Yu Xiqing to be completely at ease, they could only wait here. Hearing Bailey Hongzhuang's words, Bewitching nodded gently. Let's wait for now. Right now, they simply couldn't act rashly. Otherwise, not only would they be captured by Yu Xiqing, but Yu Xiqing would also discover the secret of the chaos ring. The consequences would be unimaginable. Yu Xiqing had been standing at the spot where Bailey Hongzhuang and Bailey Hongzhuang had been standing. In the end, she returned to the house. However, not long after Yu Xiqing returned to the house, she appeared outside again. However, Yu Xiqing noticed that no one else had appeared. Seeing this, Yu Xiqing finally relaxed a little. If that was the case, what happened before was probably just her hallucination. After all, no one would disappear in front of her at such a fast speed. Even if she was a peerless expert, she would at least notice a ray of light when she left. But now it had disappeared without a trace. It was too strange. Yu Xiqing pondered silently for a moment before finally leaving. At this time, Lan Qingyan slowly walked over from afar and said with a smile, "Great Aunt, the banquet has already started. We should also go." They had always been people of high status, so every time they appeared, they would be the last ones to appear. Chapter 2023. Hearing Lan Qingyan's words, Yu Xiqing shook her head and said, "Nothing, let's go." Seeing this, Lan Qingyan looked at Yu Xiqing suspiciously, but didn't say anything in the end. She couldn't understand what her great-aunt had been doing all this time. Bailey Hongzhuang and Bewitching had been staying in the chaos ring, thinking about when Yu Xiqing would dispel her worries. If they appeared too early, they would definitely be discovered by Yu Xiqing. If they appeared too late, then they would miss the best opportunity. Therefore, Bailey Hongzhuang and Bewitching's hearts were heavy. There are only a few minutes left before the banquet starts. Yu Xiqing probably won't stay here for long. I'll go out and take a look later. Don't go out first. Bewitching slowly said. Hearing this, Bailey Hongzhuang couldn't help but frown. How can that be? Just as Mo Yunjua said before, even if I'm caught, they won't dare to do anything to me. Moreover, with Master's relationship, it's easy for me to find out the reason. You must not appear, don't make me worry. Bewitching held Bailey Hongzhuang's hand tightly. If I'm really caught, you can take the opportunity to tell Master the news. There won't be a problem. Bewitching's voice was serious and dignified. The situation now was very serious, he mustn't be impulsive. Bailey Hongzhuang naturally understood the meaning of Bewitching's words. After thinking for a moment, she nodded. You have to be more careful. Seeing that Bailey Hongzhuang agreed to his suggestion, Bewitching was relieved. A few minutes passed in the blink of an eye. Bewitching gave Bailey Hongzhuang a look and left the chaos ring. Bailey Hongzhuang saw Bewitching leave, and couldn't help but intertwine her hands tightly together. She only hoped that Bewitching would be fine. After Bewitching left the chaos ring, he didn't see Wuxiqing's figure, but the candles in the room were still lit. Noticing this, Bewitching's eyes, which were as deep as the sea, were filled with a touch of doubt. In the distance, the sound of music sounded. The banquet had begun. Only, he didn't know if Wuxiqing actually attended the banquet. Bewitching stood in place and waited for a moment, but did not dare to use his spiritual power to investigate the situation in the room. His strength was not Wuxiqing's opponent. Once his mind spread out, Wuxiqing would notice it immediately. Therefore, Bewitching waited in place for a while. When he didn't notice any movement, he walked closer to Wuxiqing's house. After Bewitching left with Bailey Hongzhuang, her heart was hanging in the air. She didn't hear any news from Bewitching for a long time, and her face became more and more unsightly. Bewitching noticed that Wuxiqing didn't come out of the house despite his movements. His eyes lit up. Looks like Wuxiqing has already left. Bewitching was relieved and immediately contacted Bailey Hongzhuang. Bailey Hongzhuang originally thought that Bewitching was in danger, but after hearing Bewitching's words, her mood couldn't help but rise from hell to heaven. Hongzhuang, Wuxiqing has already left. We can start moving. Bewitching Wuxiqing hurriedly said. In the next moment, Bailey Hongzhuang Wuxiqing appeared beside Bewitching. Chapter 2024. After confirming that Wuxiqing had left, Bailey Hongzhuang and Bewitching quickly entered Wuxiqing's room. Previously, they had only inadvertently revealed a bit of their aura, but Wuxiqing had already discovered it. It could be seen how vigilant she was. Although Wuxiqing had left for the banquet, she might return at any time. After all, for matters like the banquet, other than the opening, it was more important. After that, they could leave whenever they wanted. According to their judgment of Wuxiqing, she would probably keep this matter in mind, so they didn't have much time. They had to hurry. Bailey Hongzhuang and Bewitching rushed into the room at lightning speed. Wuxiqing's room wasn't small, but there were many things inside, making it seem crowded. Bailey Hongzhuang only needed a glance to know that this was a doctor's specialty. It seemed that Wuxiqing's attainments in medicine weren't low. If she wasn't so obsessed with medicine, this place wouldn't be so crowded. However, Bailey Hongzhuang clearly wasn't concerned about this. She was concerned about how to find the switch to enter the dungeon. Bewitching and Bailey Hongzhuang searched for a while, but didn't find any underground passage. Clearly, Wuxiqing had set up a special mechanism. If they couldn't find the mechanism, they wouldn't be able to enter the passage. Bewitching and Bailey Hongzhuang immediately searched the room. It was no wonder that Wuxiqing had imprisoned Lan Yunxiao and Mu Lingbing for so long without anyone discovering it. This mechanism must have been set up very cleverly. Bewitching found the place where the mechanism was usually set up. However, he couldn't find the switch. As time passed, beads of sweat appeared on Bailey Hongzhuang and Bewitching's foreheads. This was something they hadn't thought of before. The Shirtian Pavilion could only help them determine the location, but didn't have the opportunity to find the mechanism. At the same time, they didn't think that Wuxiqing's mechanism would be so difficult to find. I've searched all the possible places here, but I didn't find the mechanism. Bewitching frowned. Logically speaking, such a situation shouldn't have happened. However, no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't get any results. Where was the mechanism? Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes were also filled with a hint of doubt. She had entered the house to search until now, and had not noticed the location of the mechanism. It was too strange. Although the house was not small, these were the only things that could be used as mechanisms. Could it be that there was something else that they had overlooked? Time was of the essence. Bailey Hongzhuang was very anxious, but she still forced herself to calm down. If he lost his sense of propriety at this time, it would really be over. As she pondered, Bailey Hongzhuang's gaze quietly landed on Yu Siqing's table that was piled with medicinal herbs. Bailey Hongzhuang suddenly frowned because she found a very strange herb among the herbs, the 5-flavor grass. The 5-flavor grass was a very special herb. Its effect was ordinary, and it only had a mediating effect among herbs. Bailey Hongzhuang originally didn't notice the 5-flavor grass because there was a stalk of clear confusion flower beside it. Putting the 5-flavor grass and the clear confusion flower together would affect the medicinal properties. Chapter 2025. Although she had never seen Yu Siqing's medical skills with her own eyes, judging from Yu Siqing's reputation, her medical skills would not be bad. She should know this. Thinking of this, Bailey Hongzhuang could not help but walk to the 5-flavor herb and reach out to touch it. However, Bailey Hongzhuang felt something different when she touched it. The 5-flavor herb felt different. It was very hard. Bailey Hongzhuang knew the 5-flavor herb very well. It definitely did not feel like this. After seeing Bailey Hongzhuang's action, Bewitching walked to Bailey Hongzhuang's side and looked at Bailey Hongzhuang in confusion. He did not understand why Bailey Hongzhuang took out this herb with such a strange expression. Hongzhuang, what's wrong with this herb? Since Bailey Hongzhuang showed such an expression, Bewitching knew that there must be a problem. This herb is very strange, Bailey Hongzhuang said slowly. She picked up the 5-flavor herb. Bailey Hongzhuang and Bewitching immediately focused their attention on the table. There was a very small bump on the table. If one did not look carefully, one would not notice it. Bailey Hongzhuang and Bewitching looked at each other. This was probably the mechanism. In the next moment, Bailey Hongzhuang pressed the bump. Ka. The sound of a mechanism was suddenly heard. Bailey Hongzhuang and Bewitching found that the floor tiles on the ground moved quietly and appeared in a tunnel. Seeing this scene, a smile appeared on both their faces. Although it took a lot of effort, they finally found it. Bailey Hongzhuang put the 5-flavor grass back to its original place. This Yu Siqing was really a cunning old fox. With this kind of arrangement, as long as one didn't understand medicine, they wouldn't notice the uniqueness of this medicinal herb. At this moment, Bailey Hongzhuang suddenly understood why there were so many herbs in Yu Siqing's room. From the beginning, Yu Siqing had an ulterior motive. She wanted to hide the existence of this mechanism. Bewitching also understood at this moment. He had sent people to check Yu Siqing's room before, but they did not get any results. This was because they could not find the location of the mechanism at all. He did not expect the mechanism to be so hidden. If Bailey Hongzhuang did not come with him, he would not be able to find the mechanism. In the blink of an eye, Bailey Hongzhuang and Bewitching rushed into the tunnel as soon as it opened. Time was of the essence, and no one wanted to waste any time. When Lan Yunxiao and Mu Lingbing heard the sound of the mechanism from upstairs, they couldn't help but frown. Yu Siqing's group had just come down, and they did not expect them to come again. What were they planning? However, when Lan Yunxiao and Mu Lingbing saw a completely unfamiliar young man, their eyes filled with confusion. They had been locked up in the dungeon for so many years. Other than Yu Siqing and the others they were familiar with, they had never seen anyone else. They did not know what this man was here for. However, when they saw the woman behind the young man, their eyes froze and disbelief filled their faces. Mu Lingbing stared blankly at Bailey Hongzhuang, her eyes filled with shock. That was because the face in front of him was so familiar. Chapter 2026. Lan Yunxiao's gaze was fixed on Bailey Hongzhuang. After being locked up in the dungeon for so long, many things could no longer attract his attention. Even if Yu Siqing tortured him in every possible way, he wouldn't care. However, the face in front of him had tugged at a string in his heart. He and Mu Lingbing had been locked up in the dungeon, living a life worse than death. They could have chosen to commit suicide long ago, but the stubbornness in their hearts had forced them to hold on until now. That was their daughter. Back then, they had only spent a short amount of time with their daughter. Even though the chances of their daughter surviving back then weren't very high, they were still unwilling to give up that sliver of hope. However, the figure in front of them was clearly their daughter from their dreams. "Daughter, this is my daughter." Mu Lingbing's eyes reddened as her gaze focused on Bailey Hongzhuang. She was afraid that if she blinked, the face in front of her would disappear. She even suspected that she was dreaming. Even if her daughter was still alive, she was only a citizen of Fengbo. It was impossible for her to appear here. The moment Bailey Hongzhuang saw Mu Lingbing, she was certain that the woman in front of her was her mother, because their appearances were very similar. However, Mu Lingbing's appearance was more gentle and delicate, graceful and moving. Although her heart was filled with emotions, Bailey Hongzhuang saw that Mu Lingbing and Lan Yunxiao were tied to the metal frame. Their bodies were dirty and disheveled, their skin covered in new and old scars, and the blood scabs were very obvious. Just by looking at their mangled bodies, one could tell what kind of destruction they had suffered. At this thought, the hatred in Bailey Hongzhuang's heart deepened. This Yu Xiqing was truly hateful. In the future, she would definitely bring Yu Xiqing to her parents and let them deal with her. Bailey Hongzhuang and Bewitching quickly walked to Mu Lingbing and Lan Yunxiao and used their weapons to cut the metal chains. After Mu Lingbing regained her freedom, she didn't care about anything else. She tightly held onto Bailey Hongzhuang and asked, "Are you Yixuan? You must be Yixuan." Although she had only seen Lan Yixuan when she was young, and had not seen her for so many years, kinship was just that special. She could tell that the person in front of her was her daughter. Lan Yunxiao also couldn't help looking at Bailey Hongzhuang. He didn't even have the heart to ask why she saved them. "Yixuan?" When Bailey Hongzhuang heard this name, she raised her eyebrows. It seemed that this was her real name. Bailey Hongzhuang nodded slightly. "Father, mother, I'm here to save you." Hearing her words, Mu Lingbing's tears flowed uncontrollably, tightly gripping Bailey Hongzhuang's hands, unwilling to let go. It was as if everything would disappear as soon as she let it go. Lan Yunxiao's hands gradually clenched into fists with unconcealable excitement on his face. He had never thought that one day, his daughter would actually come to save him. This was simply unimaginable. But now, it actually happened. Not only did his daughter survive, but she was also doing so well. She actually had the ability to save them. At this moment, even the iron-willed Lan Yunxiao couldn't help but tear up. All these years, no matter what kind of torture and pain he had suffered, he had never shed a tear. Chapter 2027. Mu Lingbing and Lan Yunxiao couldn't control their emotions when they heard the words father and mother. This was the greatest expectation of their lives. They didn't expect that they would actually have the hope of seeing their daughter in their lifetime. How could they not be excited? "Yunxiao, I'm not dreaming, right?" Mu Lingbing looked at Lan Yunxiao with teary eyes. The scene before her made her feel like she was in a dream. Lan Yunxiao put his hand on Mu Lingbing's shoulder. "This isn't a dream." Bailey Hongzhuang's heart was also filled with excitement. She had been thinking about what kind of expression she would have when she saw Lan Yunxiao and Mu Lingbing. Would she be able to call them father and mother? However, the moment he saw them, these two words came out of his mouth so easily. She didn't force herself to do it. It was as if she had called them father and mother many times. It was all because of her that Lan Yunxiao and Mu Lingbing had suffered for so many years. How could she not accept such great parents other than being grateful? However, this wasn't the time to reminisce. Bailey Hongzhuang hurriedly said, "Father, mother, Yu Xiqing will only be away for a while, and will be back soon. We must leave before she comes back. Let's go first." Lan Yunxiao and Mu Lingbing recovered from their excitement at Bailey Hongzhuang's words. Their daughter's ability to save them had completely exceeded their expectations. However, Yu Xiqing's strength was very formidable. Once Yu Xiqing came back, none of them would be able to leave. They had been imprisoned here for so many years. Being able to see their daughter again was already a blessing from the heavens. But they absolutely couldn't drag their daughter down. "Alright, we'll leave immediately." Lan Yunxiao and Mu Lingbing were nervous. As long as they could leave successfully, they would be able to reunite with their daughter in the future. This was a scene they had dreamed of for so many years. However, as they walked forward, they realized that after being imprisoned for so many years, their bodies had long been exhausted. Not to mention leaving Yutian City, it was difficult for them to even walk to the surface. Noticing this, Lan Yunxiao and Mu Lingbing's expressions were extremely unsightly. Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen were already very difficult to sneak in. If they brought them along, it would be too conspicuous. "Yixuan, you should leave. We can't leave in our current condition." Lan Yunxiao's resolute and handsome face was filled with seriousness and helplessness. With such a good opportunity in front of them, it was truly sad that they couldn't leave. But none of this was as important as their daughter. "Yixuan, if we leave, we'll definitely be discovered." Mu Lingbing nodded. "To be able to see you again in this lifetime, I'm already content." Mu Lingbing's eyes sparkled. She felt an indescribable sense of satisfaction at the thought that not only did her daughter survive, but she also grew up to be so outstanding. Since she was young, they had never done anything for their daughter, causing her to suffer so much pain for no reason. How could they drag their daughter down now? After hearing Mu Lingbing and Lan Yunxiao's words, Bailey Hongzhuang's heart was moved. This was kinship. Chapter 2028. In her previous life, although she had a group of elders who cared for her, she had never seen her parents. In this life, she had also never seen her parents in the first 10 years of her life. However, she could feel the love that her parents had for her from all these things. And now, the feeling in her heart was even deeper. Perhaps only the greatest power, kinship, could make her parents give up everything without hesitation. "Father, mother, since we've come to save you, we've definitely thought of a way to bring you away." Bailey Hongzhuang smiled faintly, but her smile was filled with an unprecedented emotion. In the next second, Bailey Hongzhuang couldn't help but look at Di Beichen. Di Beichen nodded. "Let's go." Bailey Hongzhuang smiled at Di Beichen's words. In the next instant, she brought Lan Yunxiao and Mu Lingbing into the chaos ring. Lan Yunxiao and Mu Lingbing were originally very worried that Bailey Hongzhuang would let her emotions affect her decisions. All these years, they had only been able to survive because of their own stubbornness. Their physical strength had long been depleted, and they were no longer the Lan Yunxiao and Mu Lingbing of the past. However, when the two of them reacted, they found themselves in another place. Baisher immediately came out to welcome Bailey Hongzhuang when he saw her enter the chaos ring. Lan Yunxiao and Mu Lingbing looked at everything in front of them in astonishment. They didn't understand what had happened and why they had suddenly appeared in another place. "Yixuan, where are we?" Mu Lingbing couldn't help but ask. "This is another space, similar to a storage space. It's just that living people can also enter." Bailey Hongzhuang explained simply. "Father, mother, I still have to go out and do something with Di Beichen. You should rest here first, and wait for us to take care of everything before we pick you up." They were only halfway through their plan, and hadn't completely solved it. Moreover, she had made the bomb herself, so she naturally had to give the Yu family a big gift. Although she already knew that her parents were not doing well these days, she was still shocked when she saw it with her own eyes. Bailey Hongzhuang's heart was already filled with anger, but she didn't show it in front of her parents. Mu Lingbing couldn't help but worry when she heard Bailey Hongzhuang's words. It wasn't easy for her to see her daughter. She didn't want her daughter to be in danger. At a time like this, Lan Yunxiao clearly thought things through and immediately said, "Hurry and go." The young man from before also looked extremely outstanding. Since he was willing to accompany Yi Xian to do such a dangerous thing, his relationship with Yi Xian must be extremely close. It was very possible that that man was Yi Xian's sweetheart. At this time, if that man was left alone outside, Yi Xian would definitely not be at ease. Bailey Hongzhuang nodded slightly, and then said to Baisher, "Baisher, keep my parents company for a while. I'll come back once I'm done." "Master, don't worry." The White Lion hurriedly spoke. It would definitely help its master take good care of its master's parents. Seeing this, Bailey Hongzhuang left the primordial chaos ring and appeared outside. Chapter 2029. Under such circumstances, Yu Xiqing was not in the mood to attend the banquet. Therefore, after staying for a short while, she decided to go back. After seeing Yu Xiqing's actions, Yu Manlan and Lan Qingyan were also puzzled. Although everyone was urging Yu Xiqing to stay, Yu Xiqing still insisted on going back to take a look. No matter what, she was still worried about the aura that had suddenly appeared. Even though she had checked many times and did not see anyone, this matter still made her feel very uneasy. She trusted her sixth sense very much. Since she was so uneasy, she might as well go back and take a look. After Bailey Hongzhuang appeared beside Bewitching, the two of them looked at each other and smiled. Then, they quickly left Yu Xiqing's house. Bailey Hongzhuang had a faint feeling that Yu Xiqing was a very difficult woman to deal with. The aura that she had accidentally revealed earlier must have made Yu Xiqing apprehensive. Therefore, it was better for them to leave as soon as possible. After Bailey Hongzhuang and Bewitching left Yu Xiqing's house, Bailey Hongzhuang directly threw an explosive inside. This explosive was a powerful one that she had specially prepared. Because she was worried about all kinds of situations, she made a very long lead that was enough for her and Bewitching to leave Yu Manlan's residence. Bewitching saw that Bailey Hongzhuang had thought of everything so well and praised her in his heart. Hongzhuang's parents had been imprisoned in this place for so many years. Presumably, Hongzhuang also hated this place to the bone. It was naturally excellent that an explosive could raise this place to the ground. Xiao He and Xiao Bai's movements were also very fast. After splitting up, they quickly scattered the poisonous powder where it should be scattered. One had to know that the speed of these two beasts was completely trained in the desert world. In addition, with their figures, no one would notice them at all. They were completely unscrupulous. After completing the task given by their master, they quickly gathered and headed to the place they had agreed upon with their master. After Bailey Hongzhuang and Bewitching left Yu Xiqing's house, they soon saw Xiao He and Xiao Bai. Xiao He and Xiao Bai quickly jumped onto Bailey Hongzhuang's shoulder with a smug look on their faces. "Master, we've done what you asked us to do," Xiao He and Xiao Bai said excitedly. Bailey Hongzhuang nodded and said, "Well done. Now, as long as we throw these bombs out, we can leave quickly." Bewitching said, "Who would have thought that there would be no need to use a bomb during a banquet?" However, since they were already here, they naturally couldn't bring these bombs back. In the next moment, Bailey Hongzhuang, Bewitching, Xiao He and Xiao Bai quickly took action. They picked up the bombs and ignited them, throwing them into the Yu clan. Boom! An earth-shattering explosion rang out, shaking the entire Yu clan. All the people with status in the Yu clan were at the banquet. Suddenly, there was such a commotion from afar. The Yu clan members were shocked for a moment, their faces filled with astonishment. There are actually criminals who came to our Yu clan to commit such atrocities. They must have eaten a bear's heart and a leopard's guts. After the Yu clan members regained their senses, their faces were filled with anger. How powerful was the Yu clan? Chapter 2030. Everyone, let's go and take a look. We must catch these villains and teach them a lesson. Damn it. Once I catch them, I'll make them wish they were dead. The Yu clan had been in the Shengxian continent for so many years, and such a thing had rarely happened. This was Yutian City. If this news were to spread, wouldn't they become a joke? After seeing this scene, Yu Manlan and Lan Qingyan's eyes were filled with astonishment. They didn't expect such a thing to happen. Today's banquet couldn't continue. Yen could it be that today's incident has something to do with us? Yu Manlan frowned. They had just arrived at the Yu clan, and such a thing had already happened. If it was because of them, it would be very bad. Hearing this, Lan Qingyan waved her hand. There were very few people who knew that we would be here today. It's definitely not because of us. Mother, don't worry. Yu Manlan nodded slightly and felt a little relieved. Thinking about it, it must have been done by some people who were dissatisfied with the Yu clan. However, such a move was unwise. Mother, since such a thing has happened, there's no point for us to continue staying here. Why don't we go and take a look? She also wanted to know what kind of person dared to offend the Yu clan. Moreover, the power of these explosives was very strong. Hearing Lan Qingyan's words, Yu Manlong came back to her senses and immediately said, "Okay, let's go and take a look." Compared to the anger of the Yu clan members, Bailey Hongzhuang, Di Beichen, Xiao He and Xiao Bai were very happy to throw the bombs. One by one, the bombs were thrown out by them, followed by a huge explosion. Seeing the Yu clan's buildings being blown up, Bailey Hongzhuang felt an indescribable joy in her heart. Although this kind of action wouldn't cause much damage to the Yu clan, it was a real slap to their face. For a cultivation family, the most important thing was their face. With this slap, the Yu clan would definitely be furious. Yu Xiqing felt that something was wrong and went to her house. However, before she reached her house, she heard the sound of the bombs. Seeing this, Yu Xiqing rushed to the location of the explosion. Who knew where this scoundrel came from? How dare he be so bold? Bailey Hongzhuang, Di Beichen and the two beasts threw the bombs very quickly. After throwing all the bombs, they quickly left the Yu clan. The Yu clan's people had already rushed over because of the commotion. The longer they stayed here, the more dangerous it would be for them. Moreover, both of them had a certain level of awareness towards danger. Faintly, they could feel danger approaching. Not long after Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen left, Yu Xiqing was already standing where Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen were standing. Yu Xiqing frowned when she sensed the familiar aura. This aura was the same one she had sensed outside the house. Although it was only for a short moment, she was still able to determine it. It seemed that her previous judgment was not wrong. Someone really did appear there. However, the other party was very powerful and had already left before she came out. When did they offend such a powerful expert? Chapter 2031. Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen quickly left the Yu clan, following the escape route that Mo Yunjue had set for them. This route was the most unexpected one. They directly passed through the entire Yu clan and escaped in the other direction of Yutian City. Almost everyone would be rushing towards Yutian City to investigate, so no one would notice them. After Lan Qingyan left the banquet, she slowly walked towards the direction of the explosion. This was the Yu clan, not the Lan clan. Therefore, she was not very anxious about such an incident. After all, the Yu clan was a medical family. Once someone failed to seek medical treatment, it was normal for them to think of ways to take revenge. However, from the fluctuations, the Yu clan's losses this time were not small. Just as Lan Qingyan was slowly walking forward, she suddenly saw two black figures flashing by not far away. Seeing this, Lan Qingyan's gaze immediately fell on the two black figures. With this look, Lan Qingyan saw a handsome face that was so beautiful that it was as if it belonged in a painting. His handsomeness could not be described with words. Even if his handsome eyebrows were tightly knitted and his thin lips were slightly pursed, he still had an indescribable charm. She had never seen such a perfect face before. It made it hard for her to breathe. Just as Lan Qingyan was in a daze, Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen's figures had already disappeared from her sight. When Lan Qingyan regained her senses, she could not help but feel annoyed in her heart. That kind of man, that kind of temperament, how could he be an ordinary person? Yu Manlong quickly caught up with Lan Qingyan and said, "Qingyan, why are you still here? A lot of places have been blown up. Let's go take a look." Just as Yu Manlong said this, an earth-shattering explosion resounded. Boom! This earth-shattering explosion caused the entire Yutian city's ground to tremble. This sound was more powerful than any of the previous sounds, deafening everyone's ears. Yu Manlong and Lan Qingyan's figures swayed on the ground, and a huge cloud of dust quickly spread out. Both of their eyes were filled with shock. What is this? Lan Qingyan looked at Yu Manlong in disbelief. Such a big movement was completely beyond her expectations. She found it hard to believe that it was caused by a bomb. That was because explosives could never cause such a huge commotion. I don't know. Only an extremely powerful expert could cause such a huge commotion. Could it be that today's situation isn't as simple as we thought? Yu Manlong immediately pulled Lan Qingyan and rushed forward. Although she had married into the Lan family, She was still a part of the Yu family in her heart. If the Yu clan had offended some formidable opponent, it would be extremely troublesome. Lan Qingyan's mind kept replaying the face that she saw before. She was sure that she wasn't dreaming. Everything was real. Qingyan, why do I feel like this movement is coming from the direction of your Great Aunt's residence? Yu Manlan pondered. Hearing this, Lan Qingyan finally recovered from her thoughts. The secret of Yu Siqing's residence could not be exposed. If the commotion really came from there, then it would be terrible. Let's go take a look. Lan Qingyan straightened her expression. She should have directly killed Lan Yunxiao and Yu Manlan. Then she wouldn't have to worry about these things. Chapter 2032. Yu Siqing's face turned ugly when she heard the explosion. She was almost certain that her house was at the center of the explosion. At this moment, she finally understood why she had been feeling uneasy all this time. So this was where the problem lay. Originally, when she saw the explosion in other places, she only thought that the culprit wanted to cause trouble for the Yu family. Now it seemed that she was one of the targets. Besides a limited number of people, no one else knew about the tunnel in the house. Now that such a huge explosion had occurred, the entire house, and even the tunnel had been razed to the ground. They were her bargaining chips. If Lan Yunxiao and Mu Lingbing died just like that, she would be very unhappy. In the next moment, Yu Siqing quickly rushed into the house. She only wanted to know who the damned bastard was that dared to do such a thing. Once she found out, she would definitely make the culprit regret being born into this world. At the same time, the Yu family's cultivators all rushed to Yu Siqing's house. With such a huge commotion, they also wanted to see the consequences. When they arrived at Yu Siqing's house, almost everyone couldn't help but gasp. Only to see that Yu Siqing's house had long disappeared, turning into ruins that covered the sky. A huge crater quietly appeared, shocking everyone. Not only Yu Siqing's house, many other houses in the vicinity were also affected and razed to the ground. On the ground, spiderweb-like cracks spread out. It was a ghastly sight. Oh my God, isn't this destructive power a little too strong? All the houses in this area were blown to smithereens. How much does this person hate Yu Siqing to be able to do such a thing? Yu Siqing's temperament has always been very strange. These years, she has offended many people. It's expected that someone would seek revenge. Even in the Yu family, Yu Siqing's reputation was not much better. This was because Yu Siqing's temper was notoriously strange. As long as she was the slightest bit dissatisfied, she could ruthlessly teach them a lesson. It was because of this that the younger generation of the Yu family were unwilling to ask Yu Siqing even if they didn't know anything about medicine. However, Yu Siqing was still an outstanding figure in the Yu family. At this moment, a young disciple noticed the existence of a tunnel in the crater and couldn't help but be shocked. Look, there's actually a tunnel there. As his voice fell, the gazes of the other disciples also landed on the passageway. That's right, there really is a passageway. It's really surprising. No wonder the crater here is so big. It turns out that there was a secret room below, but now it has been blown up. For a time, the group of young disciples looked at each other. They couldn't help but wonder why there was a secret room here. For so many years, no one knew that there was a secret room under Yu Siqing's residence. No wonder Yu Siqing liked to stay in the house for so many years. Maybe she spent all her time in the secret room. Moreover, Yu Siqing was still unmarried. As a result, many of the young disciples had strange thoughts in their minds. Perhaps, the person living in this secret room was Yu Siqing's old lover. Chapter 2033. Quite a few disciples had already arrived at the scene, and their discussions were mixed with some negative remarks. Yu Siqing looked at the flattened house with a complicated expression. With so many people around, she couldn't check on Lan Yunxiao and Mu Lingbing's situation. However, from the looks of the ruins, if Lan Yunxiao and Mu Lingbing were still in the dungeon, they would have died without a complete corpse. The Yu clan head and various elders also came to Yu Siqing's house. Although there were explosions in other places, it was obvious that Yu Siqing's house was the most serious. Moreover, with Yu Siqing's status in the Yu clan, They naturally came to check on the situation. However, when the Yu clan's clan master and the group of elders saw this scene, their faces turned ugly. Not everyone in the Yu clan was unaware of what Yu Siqing had done. At least the Yu clan head knew. However, Yu Siqing had hidden it well these past few years, so he didn't take it to heart. He didn't expect everything to be exposed today. It really exceeded their expectations. When Yu Siqing saw the Yu clan head's gaze, her expression turned gloomy. At this moment, she only hoped that Lan Yunxiao and Mu Lingbing were dead. Otherwise, once this news spread, the Long clan wouldn't let it go easily. The Yu clan and the Long clan had been in-laws for so many years, so they had a certain understanding of the Long clan's attitude. Although Yu Manlan and Lan Yunxiao had forcefully taken the rainbow pearl from Lan Yishuan and transferred it to Lan Qingyan, the situation had already escalated. At that time, the Lan family didn't allow Lan Yunxiao and Mu Lingbing to attack Lan Jingquang's family because they didn't want to lose the rainbow pearl. However, this didn't mean that the Long clan didn't remember this matter. At least, in the Long clan head's heart, this matter had never passed. Otherwise, the Long clan head wouldn't have passed the position of clan head to Lan Jingquang for so many years. It was obvious that the Long clan head was unwilling to forgive Lan Jingquang for this matter. If the Long clan head knew that it was the Yu clan who had imprisoned Lan Yunxiao and Mu Lingbing, the friendship between the two clans would probably be reduced to nothing. Suddenly Yu Siqing frowned. She smelled something strange amidst the smell of explosives. Although this smell was very subtle and mixed with the smell of gunpowder, Yu Siqing had been a doctor for so many years and was very familiar with many smells. Her sixth sense told her that there was something wrong with the smell. She immediately said, "Everyone hold your breath. There might be something wrong with the smell." When Yu Siqing finished speaking, everyone present was stunned for a moment. However, they immediately listened to her and held their breaths. After all, Yu Siqing's medical skills were very convincing. "What's wrong with that?" Yu clan's clan master asked. "I think there's another smell here other than the smell of explosives. Anyway, it's better to be careful," Yu Siqing said slowly. She didn't know if her judgment was right, but it was better to be careful at this time. Hearing this, the Yu clan patriarch nodded his head. The other party had suddenly made things difficult for the Yu clan, so it was better to be careful. Chapter 2034. Hearing the explosion, the Yu clan head and the other Yu clan members' expressions all changed. This was because the sound clearly came from the martial skills hall. The martial skills hall was the most important place in the entire clan. If something happened to the martial skills hall, then they would suffer a disastrous loss. The Yu clan's disciples all widened their eyes. They had never thought that the martial arts hall would also encounter this kind of problem. It was simply too unexpected. Within a few seconds of hearing the explosion, the Yu clan head and a group of elders quickly left Yu Siqing's residence and rushed to the martial skills hall. The martial skills hall has always been guarded. There shouldn't be any problems. Usually, when someone enters the martial skills hall, they would be discovered immediately. However, the explosion was so powerful that even if it was placed far away, it would still affect the martial skills hall. Let's quickly go and take a look. If the martial skills hall really has a problem, then I don't know what to do. When Lan Qingyan and Yu Manlan arrived, they saw this scene. Although they were shocked by the situation in the Yu clan's martial skills hall, the two of them, as well as Yu Siqing, stayed in place without leaving. There were so many people before that they didn't have the chance to pay attention to the situation in the dungeon. Now that everyone's attention was attracted by the news about the martial skills hall, they didn't notice this place at all. This gave them a chance. When everyone disappeared from Yu Siqing's sight, Yu Siqing looked down at the ruins. However, there were broken walls all around, so she couldn't see clearly. "Great Aunt, you can't expose this news." Lan Qingyan, who originally didn't care, couldn't help but worry when she saw the state of Yu Siqing's room. Their status in the Lan clan was extremely high, but if the Lan clan knew that they had imprisoned Lan Yunxiao and his wife for so many years, their reputation would quickly plummet. The clan head would definitely be dissatisfied with them. After all, they were from the Lan clan. "Aunt, what should we do now?" Yu Manlan's face was filled with anxiety. She should have killed Lan Yunxiao and Mu Lingbing. Now that something like this had happened, she didn't know whether they were dead or alive. What Yu Manlan hoped the most was that Lan Yunxiao and Lan Yunxi were dead. That way, as long as they cleaned up the corpses, there wouldn't be any other problems. "I know." Yu Xiqing's tone was icy cold, revealing a trace of impatience. Today's events were beyond her expectations. However, she could faintly sense the aura of a conspiracy. So many places in the Yu clan had been bombed, which had originally dispelled her worries. However, now that her residence had been bombed to such a state, in addition to the aura she had felt outside her house, could it be that the other party had come here for her? When this thought appeared in Yu Xiqing's mind, her face turned ugly. If that was the case, the other party would wait until she left before making a move. Could their target be Lan Yunxiao and Mu Lingbing in the dungeon? However, other than Situ Yen, no one else in this world would pay attention to this matter. Chapter 2035. When Yu Manlan and Lan Qingyan saw Yu Xiqing's unhappy expression, they didn't dare to say anything else. After all, they had a certain understanding of Yu Xiqing's temper. If they angered Yu Xiqing, the result would not be good. Thus, even though Lan Qingyan and Yu Manlan were very anxious, they didn't dare to show it. They could only hope that this wouldn't happen. As Yu Xiqing lifted a piece of the wreckage, Lan Qingyan and the others noticed the bloodstains on the ground. It was clearly badly mutilated. Seeing this, Yu Manlan couldn't help but sigh in relief. Her eyes were filled with joy. All along, she had hoped that Lan Yunxiao and Mu Lingbing would disappear from this world. Once they were dead, everything would be over. However, Yu Xiqing and Lan Jingquang had never agreed. She didn't expect that today's incident would actually help her. Now, she didn't need to sleep at night and worry about being exposed one day. When Lan Qingyan saw the bloodstains on the ground, her eyes also revealed a trace of joy. Yu Manlan and Yu Xiqing had never hidden anything from her. She knew that the rainbow sacred pearl in her body was stolen from Lan Yishuan. However, she didn't care at all, because the rainbow sacred pearl was hers. As the owner of the rainbow sacred pearl, her status in the Lan family was unparalleled. Similarly, only she could understand the power of the seven-colored divine pearl. She could only say that the younger sister she had never met was unlucky. If the rainbow sacred pearl hadn't appeared in her body, then this wouldn't have happened. Many things were predestined from the moment they were born. Perhaps the heavens had arranged Lan Yishuan's birth to make a wedding dress for her. Otherwise, how could Lan Yishuan have such a short life? So what if Lan Yunxiao was glorious in the past? After being a prisoner for so many years, he was no longer the same as before. His body was exhausted and useless. Speaking of which, Lan Yunxiao's family was their stepping stone. There was no need to care about them. After all, the Lan family was their world. She couldn't be bothered to care about the history of the past. When Yu Xiqing saw the bloodstains on the ground, her worry dissipated a little. In that case, the other party might have done this because she wasn't willing to help. Over the years, she had been unwilling to save many people. It was normal. When the Yu clan members arrived at the martial arts hall, they saw that the martial arts hall had collapsed. The elder who was guarding the martial arts hall had an ugly expression as he looked at the collapsed martial arts hall. All these years, they had been guarding the martial skills hall, and such a problem had never occurred. That was because no one dared to force their way in. He never thought that something like this would happen today. Chief Elder, why did something like this happen? The Yu clan patriarch's face was extremely ugly. The martial arts hall was the foundation of the Yu clan, and now it had actually collapsed with a loud bang. Once this news spread out, the entire Yu clan would become a joke. Moreover, judging from the current situation, they had suffered great losses. The chief elder's expression was extremely ugly. He did not expect such a thing to happen. Previously, he had not sensed any movement at all. When the sudden explosion occurred, he could only quickly leave the martial arts hall when he discovered it. Chapter 2036. When the head elder said this, he also felt embarrassed. As the head elder, his strength was needless to say. Now that the martial arts hall had become like this, he actually didn't know what had happened. It was really too embarrassing. Hearing the head elder's words, the Yu clan head and the other elders carefully looked around and understood what had happened. The head elder was usually only concerned about the martial arts hall's situation. As long as no one barged into the martial arts hall, he didn't need to care. Normally, people who came to the martial arts hall would want the martial arts hall's martial arts hall. After all, their Yu clan was an aristocratic family of cultivators. The martial arts hall's martial arts hall were all extremely high level. Who would have thought that the other party would place the explosives at a certain distance from the martial arts hall? Furthermore, the other party was not interested in the martial arts hall at all. Where did such a weirdo come from? When the Yu clan people saw this scene, they were really speechless. The martial arts hall had collapsed just like that. This was definitely not a small loss. We must find out who did this. I must kill them. The Yu clan head's face was as gloomy as water. He had been the Yu clan head for so many years, but this had never happened before. It was really too infuriating. Yes, we must find the culprit and make him suffer a fate worse than death. Daring to offend our Yu clan, he must have eaten a bear's heart and leopard's guts. The Yu clan elders all expressed their opinions. The other party's actions were no different from a ruthless slap to their faces. It was abnormally loud. Such a big commotion had attracted almost everyone in Yutian City. Even if they wanted to hide this news, they couldn't hide it. Therefore, if they wanted to restore the Yu clan's reputation, they could only catch the culprit. Otherwise, it would be a huge loss of face for him. Just when the Yu clan people were furious and wanted to bring the culprit to justice, an explosion followed, causing all the Yu clan people's faces to darken to the extreme. Hung! The shocking explosion shocked everyone. They thought that this matter was over, but they didn't expect that the place where the explosion came from made them even more speechless. Because the place where the explosion came from was obviously their ancestral hall. Ancestral hall, how important was that place? It was the place where the clan's inheritance was located. Now it had actually exploded. Just by looking at the state of the martial arts hall, everyone was almost certain that the ancestral hall had been razed to the ground. The Yu clan patriarch's face was as black as the bottom of a pot. Now that such a thing had happened, how could he face the Yu clan's ancestors? If this news were to spread out, it would not only be a slap to the face, the entire Yu clan would become a laughing stock, unable to extricate themselves from it for many years. Investigate. Find out who did this, and I'll tear him to pieces. The Yu clan master roared. The veins on his temples bulged, and his face instantly flushed red. This was definitely a huge stain in his life. No matter who dared to do such a thing, he would make that person suffer a fate worse than death. The group of elders looked at each other in dismay. Their faces were also ugly to the extreme. The position that the other party was attacking was so special. Furthermore, they didn't want anything at all. They only wanted to destroy the Yu clan. How much did they hate the Yu clan to do such a thing? Under the orders of the Yu clan master, everyone no longer had the mood to calculate the losses of the Yu clan this time. Instead, they started to investigate the main culprit. Chapter 2037. After Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen left the Yu clan, they headed towards the direction that they had prepared earlier. At the same time, Mo Yunjua's other two underlings had also replaced her and Di Beichen's identities in the afternoon. This way, Mo Yunjua would also be able to escape suspicion. This was undoubtedly the best outcome. Bailey Hongzhuang's face was full of smiles. Even though they were already a distance away from the Yu clan, she could still hear the Yu clan's roars. The martial arts hall, the ancestral hall, these were the most important places in the Yu clan. After this incident, the Yu clan's mood could be imagined. Thinking of the Yu clan's angry faces, Bailey Hongzhuang felt an indescribable joy in her heart. However, this was only the interest that she had collected for now. It wouldn't be long before she would let the Yu clan know what true pain was. Master, the Yu clan's people have already gone crazy from anger. Xiao Hei's face was full of excited smiles. If it could, It really wanted to stay in the Yu clan to see their expressions. Master is a professional face-slapping expert. The entire Yution city is in an uproar. It would be strange if the Yu clan's people didn't die from anger. Xiaobai couldn't help but laugh out loud. Those despicable people. It's time for them to be punished. Haha, good and evil will always have their retribution. Bailey Hongzhuang's exquisite face was full of carefree smiles. Ever since she knew about her parents' situation, she hadn't laughed so happily for a long time. At least, her parents were safe and sound now. The heavens were not so cruel to her. She still had a chance to reunite with her parents. At this moment, Bailey Hongzhuang only felt that the huge rock that had been pressing on her heart had finally been lifted. Although there were still many things to do, the thing that she was most worried about would not happen. She could also relax a little. Bewitching looked at Bailey Hongzhuang, who was laughing heartily. His eyes were also filled with joy. These days, seeing how Hongzhuang worked so hard, he couldn't help but feel heartache. Although Hongzhuang had never shown any signs of stress or sadness, he had always understood. At this moment, when he saw Hongzhuang's smile, he felt that it was more precious than anything else. Wife, I found that the explosives this time are much more powerful than the ones made by the palace master's wife. Bewitching's eyes were filled with astonishment. Previously, when he was in the Limitless Palace, he had witnessed the power of explosives with his own eyes. However, judging from the fluctuations produced by the Yu clan just now, this fluctuation was obviously much more powerful than what he had seen before. Hearing that, Bailey Hongzhuang smiled and said, "This is a big gift that I have specially prepared for the Yu clan." The power of the explosives made by Master's wife was naturally not small, but it was very difficult to blow up the Martial Skills Hall. The Martial Skills Hall was much sturdier than other places. Moreover, she knew that there would definitely be people guarding the Martial Skills Hall, so she had to keep a certain distance from the Martial Skills Hall. Otherwise, they would have been discovered before they could even set up the explosives. It was precisely because of this that she had to specially prepare these powerful explosives. In this way, the people in the Martial Skills Hall would not be on guard. Naturally, the effect would be unexpected. Hearing Bailey Hongzhuang's words, Bewitching, Xiaohei and Xiaobai's eyes were filled with astonishment. They never thought that Bailey Hongzhuang would be so thoughtful. Chapter 2038. Today, Bewitching also knew that Bailey Hongzhuang had learned how to make explosives in the Chaos Ring. Obviously, such powerful explosives were made by Bailey Hongzhuang. Bewitching couldn't help but sigh at his wife's prowess. No matter what it was, Hongzhuang always learned it extremely quickly. This kind of talent and comprehension was not something that ordinary people could have. Thinking back, when he left Limitless Palace, Hongzhuang had just started to learn about explosives. Until now, it hadn't been long, but Bailey Hongzhuang had already mastered explosives to such a level. Other than her, no one else could do it. Wife, what you did this time really gave the Yu clan a headache. Bewitching's face was full of smiles. The Yu clan was so hateful. He only hoped that the Yu clan could get the punishment they deserved. As long as his wife was happy, that was enough. As the young sect master of Tiangang sect, he had a certain understanding of the cultivation families. The ancestral hall, the martial arts hall, these were the foundation of the clan. Hongzhuang's actions definitely made the Yu clan lose face. Hearing Bewitching's words, Bailey Hongzhuang smiled. Since we have already come here, we naturally have to leave some impression on them. The next time we come, I will give them a big gift that will be even more impressive than this time. Bewitching looked deeply at Bailey Hongzhuang. He didn't doubt Bailey Hongzhuang's ability at all. Although the Yu clan was a huge clan, Hongzhuang always had a special kind of power that made people believe in her. No matter how hard it was to climb the mountain in front of them, they could climb it one by one. After we go back, we must properly understand the Yu clan's actions. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled lightly. She really wanted to know how furious the Yu clan would be after such a thing. Bewitching nodded, a hint of slyness in his smile. That's a must. Bailey Hongzhuang and Bewitching looked at each other. Their smiles deepened, but their footsteps didn't slow down at all. The Yu clan's reaction speed was very fast. Once the Yu clan reacted, they would immediately chase after them. Even if they hadn't been discovered before, they still had to hurry up now. This area was within the Yu clan's sphere of influence. They would only be truly safe after leaving this area. Master, after we rescued your parents, why did we create the illusion that they were already dead? Little Black looked at Bailey Hongzhuang curiously. Originally, he thought that as long as they left, it would be fine. He didn't expect that his master would set up such a trap. Her ink-black phoenix eyes were filled with a calm and quiet light. Now is not the time to let them know. Once Yu Xiqing and the rest know, they will definitely follow the vine to the melon and find Tiangang sect very quickly. This way, Lan Jingquang and his family would be prepared. And I want to catch them off guard when they're completely unprepared. Lan Jingquang and his family were so despicable, but they still pretended to be dignified. She wouldn't give them a chance to confess. She wanted to rip off their hypocritical masks when they were unprepared. Chapter 2039. Following Bailey Hongzhuang's words, Xiao He and Xiao Bai's hearts shook. They hadn't thought of so many problems before. They hadn't expected their master to have already thought of everything. Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes were filled with resentment. Lan Jingquang's family had stolen everything that belonged to her family, and even tortured her father and mother into such a state. Now they had a chance to turn the tables. She wanted Lan Jingquang's family to experience what it felt like to fall into an abyss. They'd lived in glory for so many years, doing their best to hide their despicable deeds. However, paper couldn't wrap fire. There would be a day when they would be exposed. Moreover, the longer they hid, the more serious the consequences would be once they were exposed. Bailey Hongzhuang's voice was cold without any warmth. Bewitching could also feel the bone-deep hatred in Bailey Hongzhuang's words. Actually, he knew very well. Today, when they saw Lan Yunxiao and Mu Lingbing's tortured appearance, even his heart was filled with shock. The two of them, once famous, had been reduced to prisoners. Hideous wounds covered their bodies, their faces were pale, and their footsteps were weak. Back then, Lan Yunxiao and Mu Lingbing were extremely famous figures. They were powerful and had strong bodies. However, so many years of torture had turned them into this state. They couldn't even stand properly after walking a few steps. Only Hongzhuang knew how much of an impact this scene had on Hongzhuang. He wanted to comfort Hongzhuang, but he knew it was useless. All of this could only be repaid by Lan Jingquang's family. Time had been too tight, so they didn't have time to say much and left quickly. Bailey Hongzhuang and Bewitching moved quickly. The Yu clan's response was equally shocking. Almost as soon as the Yu clan gave the order, everyone in Yutian City began to move. In an instant, Yutian City was brightly lit. Every passageway was filled with people as they quickly chased after the culprit who had left. Under these circumstances, even the Yu clan's elders couldn't hold themselves back and began to move. With such a huge commotion, the other clans would receive the news in a short time. If they didn't capture the culprits as soon as possible, they would lose all face. Mo Yunjue and his subordinates had already returned to the house, pretending not to know anything. Young Master, Miss Bailey and young Sect Master D have caused quite a commotion this time. A subordinate reported the situation to Mo Yunjue. They had thought that Bailey Hongzhuang and the others would leave after rescuing them. But they didn't expect so many things would happen. It's too unexpected. Mo Yunjue was also shocked by Bailey Hongzhuang's actions. With such a huge commotion, the entire Yutian city was shaken. Thinking back to Hongzhuang's expression when she said she wanted to leave some gifts for the Yu clan, he really didn't expect that Hongzhuang would do such a thing. But now, it seemed that Hongzhuang's every move was extraordinary. What did Hongzhuang do? Mo Yunjue asked. Chapter 2040. Reporting to young master, Lady Bailey has blown up Yu Xiqing's residence. Hearing this, Mo Yunjue raised his eyebrows. He had previously felt that this movement was very shocking, but he didn't know how Hongzhuang did it. Now it seemed that Hongzhuang had prepared explosives. Only Yu Xiqing's residence? Mo Yunjue followed up and asked. He heard several explosions, and they didn't come from the same place. Not only that, There was also the Yu clan's martial arts hall, and the ancestral hall. When the cultivator from Shirtian Pavilion said this, there was a hint of surprise on his face. He felt that this Lady Bailey was really a god. This kind of destructive power. Ordinary people really couldn't do it. The martial arts hall was a place heavily guarded by the Yu clan. But Lady Bailey blew it up without saying anything. This kind of courage was really amazing. As for the ancestral hall, he really admired Lady Bailey's brain. Ordinary people really couldn't think of such a bad thing for Yenner. After such a thing happened, it would be strange if the Yu clan wasn't flustered and exasperated. The ancestral tablets were gone. Even if they were rebuilt, it would be a stain in the Yu clan's history that was difficult to cover up. For someone like Lady Bailey to not stay in their Shirtian tower, it would be a waste of her talent. Following this cultivator's words, the other cultivators in the room couldn't help but smile. But they didn't laugh out loud. The Yu clan was really unlucky this time. Mo Yunjue raised his beautiful lips, and a hint of interest appeared on his extraordinarily handsome face. Hong Zhuang's character really didn't change at all. The Yu clan provoked Hong Zhuang. That was really a tragedy. Well done. Mo Yunjue chuckled, and then his gaze fell on the cultivators who were trying their best to hold back their laughter. If you want to laugh, then laugh. No need to hold it in. What Hong Zhuang did this time, except for the Yu clan, everyone couldn't help but laugh. As soon as he said this, the group of cultivators couldn't help but laugh out loud. This kind of thing, Bailey Hong Zhuang was really the best. You should pay attention to the Yu clan's movements. If there's any news, come and tell me. Mo Yunjue's eyes flashed with wisdom. Based on his understanding of Bailey Hong Zhuang's actions were probably not limited to this. As for what else was there, that was something they needed to pay close attention to. Yes, Bailey Hong Zhuang and Bewitching worked hard to move forward. After a while, a figure suddenly appeared in front of them. Seeing this figure, Bailey Hong Zhuang and Bewitching both smiled. Grandfather, Master. Si Tuyen put his index finger in front of his lips, signaling Bailey Hong Zhuang and Bewitching not to make a sound. In the next moment, Si Tuyen directly led Bailey Hong Zhuang and Bewitching into the bushes. Bailey Hong Zhuang and Bewitching followed behind Si Tuyen and quickly hid their breath and breathing. Just as Bailey Hong Zhuang and the other two hid, two figures appeared at the place where Bailey Hong Zhuang and Bewitching were just a moment ago. I clearly felt that there were two auras that left here. Why did they suddenly disappear in such a short time? A man who was about 60 years old frowned, and his eyes were filled with doubt. Chapter 2041. Bailey Hong Zhuang and Bewitching broke out in cold sweat when they saw the two men. Previously, they had not sensed anyone following them at all. If Si Tuyen had not come, they would have been caught by now. Si Tuyen glanced at Bailey Hong Zhuang and Bewitching, signaling them to keep quiet. However, Si Tuyen did not look nervous at all. If it was not for the fact that he did not want to alert the enemy, he would have killed the two of them. Bailey Hong Zhuang and Bewitching naturally knew how powerful Si Tuyen was, so they were not worried. Since there was an expert like Si Tuyen around, it would be useless no matter how hard the two of them searched. After searching for a while, the two of them returned to their original spot helplessly. Could it be that the other party just disappeared into thin air? Could it be that you sensed wrongly? If not, let's go back quickly. The clan master is furious. Let's not waste any more time. No matter what, we must catch the culprit tonight. The two of them were furious. As the Yu clan's elders, they had never been humiliated like this before. Soon the two of them left. However, Si Tuyen did not stand up. Instead, he continued to hide in the bushes. Bailey Hong Zhuang and Bewitching's eyes were still fixed on the place where they left. As expected, the two of them returned to their original spot after disappearing for a while. After seeing that there was still no one, the two of them frowned even more. After the two of them left again, Bailey Hong Zhuang was about to get up, but Si Tuyen suddenly pulled her back and said, "Don't be impatient." Hearing this, Bailey Hong Zhuang's eyes were filled with surprise. Then she stopped moving. In the next moment, the two of them appeared again. Bailey Hong Zhuang was shocked. The Yu clan's people were really cautious. They actually came twice. If her grandfather wasn't here, she wouldn't have been able to escape. Xiao He and Xiao Bai's eyes were also filled with admiration. These two fellows were really too cunning. They actually did things so flawlessly. Under such circumstances, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other two waited in the bushes for the time it takes for an incense stick to burn before leaving. The two elders of the Yu clan checked 3 times, but didn't find anyone. Only then did they leave. "Grandfather, if you hadn't come, then we would have been in trouble." Bailey Hongzhuang couldn't help but sigh. Hearing this, Situ Yin smiled kindly. These two people are the Yu clan's 2 elders who are the best at tracking. Normal people wouldn't be able to hide from them. Back then, Lan Yunxiao and Mu Lingbing were captured precisely because their tracking skills were too formidable. Situ Yan's eyes turned cold when he said that. With your strength, it's normal that you can't sense their presence. So you must be more careful in the future. Bailey Hongzhuang nodded her head slightly, her heart sinking as she remembered the faces of the 2 elders of the Yu family. The next time she sees these 2 fellows, she will definitely kill them. Bewitching also understood at this moment. No wonder they didn't sense anything before. It turned out that these 2 people's specialty was tracking. "Have you saved your parents?" Situ Yin couldn't help but ask. Chapter 2042. Bailey Hongzhuang and Bewitching smiled at Situ Yin's question. "We've already rescued them." Situ Yin heaved a sigh of relief when he heard this. He had thought of doing it himself, but this was a good opportunity for Bailey Hongzhuang. Thus, he wanted to see Bailey Hongzhuang and Bewitching's growth. However, he couldn't help but worry. That's good. After all these years, he had never seen his daughter. Although Mu Lingbing had suffered a lot, from now on, all her suffering would end. On one hand, he wanted to make it up to Mu Lingbing. On the other hand, he wanted to know Mu Jin's whereabouts. Bailey Hongzhuang, Bewitching, and Situ Yin didn't say much along the way. The Yu clan could catch up to them at any time. In addition, Lan Yunxiao and Mu Lingbing's bodies were extremely weak, so they needed to return to Tiangang sect as soon as possible. However, Bailey Hongzhuang also told Situ Yin that she had the Chaos Ring. Bailey Hongzhuang believed that Situ Yin was her grandfather. When Situ Yin found out that Bailey Hongzhuang had the Chaos Ring, he was completely shocked. However, after knowing the true value of the Chaos Ring, Situ Yin repeatedly warned Bailey Hongzhuang not to tell anyone else about it. Otherwise, once others found out about it, it would bring about a fatal disaster. Back then, Lan Yunxiao and Mu Lingbing were too outstanding, so they were framed by Lan Jingquang and his family. The tallest tree in the forest would be destroyed by the wind. Bailey Hongzhuang being able to obtain the Chaos Ring was a great opportunity for her. However, if she didn't hide it well, it would be a disaster. Bailey Hongzhuang had already expected Situ Yin to remind her like this. However, after seeing Situ Yin's vigilant and worried gaze, Bailey Hongzhuang felt a wave of warmth in her heart. In the past, she had been all alone in the Shengxian continent. Now, not only did she have a grandfather, she had also successfully reunited with her parents. This was truly the happiest thing in the world. After telling Situ Yin about this, Bailey Hongzhuang no longer had to be on guard. She immediately entered the Chaos Ring with Xiao He and Xiao Bai. At the same time, Situ Yin and Bewitching headed towards Tiangang sect. Lan Yunxiao and Mu Lingbing had been worried ever since Bailey Hongzhuang left. However, because their bodies were too weak, coupled with their sudden excitement, they had expended a great deal of energy. Under such circumstances, Mu Lingbing couldn't bear it and fainted. When Bailey Hongzhuang entered the Chaos Ring, she saw the unconscious Mu Lingbing. However, Lan Yunxiao persisted. When he saw Bailey Hongzhuang arrive, he sighed in relief. He had been so worried that Yishuan would be in danger because of them. As her parents, they hadn't taken good care of her since she was young, causing her to be hurt like that. If Yishuan was still hurt because of them when she grew up, then they really wouldn't have the face to face it. "Master, you're here." Baishir sighed in relief when he saw Bailey Hongzhuang arrive. He had been very worried before, but he couldn't disturb his master in Bewitching, so he could only wait. Chapter 2043. Your mother's body was too weak. and after that incident she fainted. Lan Yunxiao spoke slowly, his expression helpless. Long before, when they were locked up in the dungeon, they would often faint. Compared to their robust bodies in the past, their bodies were now extremely weak. As long as something happened or they received some stimulation, they wouldn't be able to bear it. Even as a man, he found it hard to bear, much less Mu Lingbing. Before meeting Bailey Hongzhuang, Yu Manlin's provocation had already caused Mu Lingbing's heart to burn with rage. After seeing Bailey Hongzhuang, she had sunk into ecstasy. After experiencing such fury and ecstasy, Mu Lingbing's collapse was within expectations. Bailey Hongzhuang immediately understood when she heard Lan Yunxiao's words. In the next moment, Bailey Hongzhuang directly took Mu Lingbing's pulse. With this pulse, Bailey Hongzhuang's face gradually sank. She had long expected Mu Lingbing's body to be extremely weak, but she hadn't expected it to be to this extent. Not only was she weak, but she also discovered that Mu Lingbing's body was poisoned by many different kinds of lethal poisons. These poisons had different effects, and they intertwined in Mu Lingbing's body. Some counteracted each other, while others used poison to fight poison. It was extremely complicated. It was precisely because of these poisons that Mu Lingbing was so weak. Although Bailey Hongzhuang didn't know what these poisons were, she knew that because of them, Mu Lingbing had to endure excruciating pain. "Father, has Yu Siqing been experimenting on you all these years and made you take poison?" Bailey Hongzhuang asked in a low voice. Although it was a question, her tone was certain. Lan Yunxiao's eyes filled with shock at Bailey Hongzhuang's words. "Yishuan, do you know medicine as well?" Bailey Hongzhuang nodded slightly. Her gaze landed on Lan Yunxiao's face, but she didn't say anything else. Lan Yunxiao faintly sighed. "That's right. All these years, Yu Siqing has been using us as test subjects and constantly experimenting. In fact, both he and Mu Lingbing had thought about it over the years. Sometimes, after Yu Siqing made them take some things, it was really painful to the point of death. However, in the end they persevered because of their own beliefs. In the past, Yu Siqing had also made them consume poison, but in the end they were saved. All along, Yu Siqing had wanted to torture them and make them wish they were dead." Hearing Lan Yunxiao's words, the resentment in Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes deepened. In the future, she'll definitely capture Yu Siqing and use her to test her poison. She'll have her taste the feeling of not being able to live, not being able to beg for death. When Lan Yunxiao saw Bailey Hongzhuang's increasingly gloomy expression, he couldn't help but ask, "Yishuan, we both understand our bodies. As long as we can see you before we die, we will be satisfied." Chapter 2044. Bailey Hongzhuang could hear an indescribable heartache from Lan Yunxiao's words. She had always been grateful for everything Lan Yunxiao and Mu Lingbing had done for her, and understood how precious family love was. However, when she heard Lan Yunxiao's words, she felt indescribably moved. Lan Yunxiao's gaze towards her was filled with love and gentleness, like a gentle ocean, warm and boundless. When she sensed Lan Yunxiao's sorrow, she also felt uncomfortable. "Father, although your and mother's bodies are in bad condition, believe me, I can definitely cure you." Her exquisite and beautiful face shone with confidence. Bailey Hongzhuang had always been interested in medicine, but it wasn't until this moment that she felt it was the greatest value of learning it. Although Lan Yunxiao and Mu Lingbing's conditions were terrible, she only needed some time to understand the composition of these poisons. Then she would be able to cure them one by one. As for their weakness, as long as they were properly nourished, she believed it wouldn't take long for them to recover. Lan Yunxiao's face was filled with astonishment as he looked at Bailey Hongzhuang in astonishment. He wondered if he had misheard. He was well aware of how terrible his body was. However, Yishuan actually said she had the confidence to cure him? "Don't worry, Master's medical skills are amazing. They're not inferior to Yu Siqing at all." Baisher smiled. "What do you mean by not inferior to Yu Siqing? They're definitely better than Yu Siqing, alright?" Xiao He immediately stood out to refute Baisher's words. Not many people could compare to his master's medical skills. Even that old monster, Yu Siqing, wasn't master's match. When Lan Yunxiao heard Bai Shi and Xiao Hei's words, he finally understood. It turned out that his daughter was so formidable. She had completely exceeded his expectations. Bailey Hongzhuang took out a qi replenishing pill from her cosmos bag and fed it to Mu Lingbing. Mu Lingbing's body was in a terrible condition, so she had to understand it clearly before she could start treating her. If she acted rashly, it was very likely to affect the whole situation. In the next moment, pills quickly appeared in Bailey Hongzhuang's hands. Mu Lingbing's body was too weak right now, and she needed to be nourished. If she wanted to neutralize the poison, she needed Mu Lingbing to have a strong body. Otherwise, it would be difficult to proceed. Fortunately, she and Bewitching had already expected such a situation to happen, so they had prepared a lot of nourishing pills. Qi replenishing pill, blood replenishing pill, yin nourishing pill, yang replenishing pill. These medicinal pills all had excellent effects when saving people, and their value was also not cheap. However, Bailey Hongzhuang quickly separated the pills that were suitable for Mu Lingbing and Lan Yunxiao, and then gave a handful to Lan Yunxiao. Father, take these pills first, then have a good sleep. You'll feel much better when you wake up. Her light and melodious voice was filled with concern. All the suffering Lan Yunxiao and the rest had endured all these years was because of her. When Lan Yunxiao saw Bailey Hongzhuang handing over so many pills, his eyes were filled with amazement. He really wanted to know what Bailey Hongzhuang had experienced all these years. Chapter 2045. However, even though Lan Yunxiao had too many questions in his heart, he didn't voice them out, because now wasn't the time to talk about them. In the next moment, Lan Yunxiao swallowed all the pills Bailey Hongzhuang gave him. Seeing this, Bailey Hongzhuang also fed Mu Lingbing pills one by one. Lan Yunxiao was also extremely tired, but he persevered because he was worried about Bailey Hongzhuang. Now that he had relaxed, he couldn't take it anymore and fainted. Bailey Hongzhuang moved Mu Lingbing and Lan Yunxiao onto the bed one by one. Then she carefully checked their pulse, understanding their body's condition. Now that she had saved her parents with great difficulty, how could she accept them leaving like this? Therefore, no matter what, she had to cure her parents. In the future, their family would appear together in the Lan estate and take back everything they had lost. With this determination, Bailey Hongzhuang carefully calculated everything. She took some of Mu Lingbing and Lan Yunxiao's blood and used it to investigate the composition of their bodies. After more than 10 years of torture, they had taken countless poisons over the years. To detoxify them was a complicated project. The three beasties didn't dare disturb Bailey Hongzhuang when they saw her so busy. Once their master became serious, she was very frightening. Moreover, they were facing Lan Yunxiao and Mu Lingbing this time. After Si Tuyen and Bewitching understood the difference in their bodies, their hearts sank. The two of them immediately returned to Tiangang sect at their fastest speed. Only after they returned would they have many medicinal ingredients and treasures to treat Lan Yunxiao and Mu Lingbing. Just as Bailey Hongzhuang's group was rushing to Tiangang sect, the Yu clan members' expressions were extremely unsightly. They had already done their best to find the culprit, but in the end, they hadn't found anything. Instead, the culprit had left just like that. This was a resounding slap to the face of every member of the Yu clan. Under these circumstances, they felt extremely helpless. The clan master was furious, and the Yu clan cultivators were suffering unspeakably. The strangest thing was that in the next few days, the Yu clan's cultivators fell down one after another, showing signs of high fever. Among them, the situation was most common among the younger generation of the Yu clan. The Yu clan was a famous medical family. When such a situation occurred, they naturally started to treat the patient immediately. However, after this treatment, they realized that the situation was not as simple as it seemed. It was not something that could be easily cured. On the contrary, the situation was extremely complicated. Furthermore, this medicine was extremely potent. If it was not treated within a few hours, the patient would die. In this way, the Yu clan could be said to have suffered heavy losses. Regardless of whether it was a young disciple or a mainstay, under such a poison, they would only end up dying. Compared to the losses caused by the explosion, this kind of loss was something that the Yu clan could not bear. The Yu clan's people were currently as anxious as ants on a hot pan. All the doctors had gathered together to discuss how to cure the poison. However, no matter how they discussed, they were unable to obtain a sincere answer. Chapter 2046. Within a short period of time, many people in the Yu clan had been infected. For a moment, not only could they not find a way to treat it, they did not even have a way to prevent it from spreading. Some of the Yu clan's doctors were also accidentally infected when they were trying to understand the illness. This was simply spreading to a large number of people. Yu Manlan and Lan Qingyan could not help but worry when they saw the Yu clan become such a place. If they were to be infected, they would only end up dying. Yu Manlan and Lan Qingyan could not understand why such a thing would happen after they came to the Yu clan. However, under the current situation, it was better for them to leave. If they lost their lives here, it would be really depressing. When Yu Manlan and Lan Qingyan left, the expressions of the Yu clan's people were not good. The Yu clan was now shunned by the others. When some of the younger disciples of the Yu clan saw that Yu Manlan and Lan Qingyan were about to leave, their expressions were also extremely ugly. In their opinion, this incident happened after Yu Manlan and Lan Qingyan came. Moreover, everyone knew that Yu Manlan and Lan Qingyan had the best relationship with Wuxia. The other party had placed a total of 3 powerful explosives. Other than the 2 extremely important places, the Martial Skills Hall and the Ancestral Hall, the other place was Wuxia's residence. In comparison, the explosion of Wuxia's residence was the strangest place. Therefore, many people felt that this matter was related to Yu Manlan and Lan Qingyan. Perhaps, the other party had followed Yu Manlan and Lan Qingyan all the way here. Now that such a thing had happened, Yu Manlan and Lan Qingyan wanted to leave. Naturally, they were unhappy. After hearing Yu Manlan and Lan Qingyan's farewell, the Yu clan master's dignified face became gloomy. Regardless of whether this matter had anything to do with Yu Manlan and Lan Qingyan, they were still part of the Yu clan. Now that they were in such a hurry to leave, one could imagine the pain in his heart. However, after thinking about it, the Yu clan master did not say anything. He just waved his hand and let Yu Manlan and Lan Qingyan leave. If they continued to stay here, once the 2 of them were infected, the Lan family would probably be alarmed. However, the Yu clan master was very dissatisfied with Yu Manlan. The reason why Yu Manlan was able to obtain such a position in the Lan family was all because of their Yu family. Now that something had happened to her family, Yu Manlan was actually staying out of it and avoiding it like the plague. It really made people unhappy. Yu Manlan and Lan Qingyan also knew that the Yu clan was unhappy with them. When they left, almost everyone's attitude towards them was much colder. However, even if they knew this, they still had to consider their own lives. Yin heir, if we leave like this, I'm afraid that the Yu clan will be very dissatisfied with us. Yu Manlan's face was filled with worry. If the Yu clan no longer supported them because of this matter, it would be a huge loss. All these years, the Lan family head had been unwilling to hand over the position of family head to Lan Jingquang. If it wasn't for the Yu clan's support and suggestion, it would have been impossible for the Lan clan's patriarch to succeed. That old man refused to give up and insisted on waiting for Lan Yunxiao's return. How foolish. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support. And don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.